You think maybe the people at Carnival would have said, hey, I think the ship's sinking. Whee! Hello everyone, in today's video we're going to be taking a look at the basics of Dead Reckoning. We've done some things with Dead Reckoning in the past, but there's been an interesting influx of new folks looking for kind of simpler explanations, so I thought we'd take a little bit of time today to basically go over what Dead Reckoning is, kind of how you do the math, and kind of how you know where you are. So let's go ahead and get started. So first things first, we're sitting here on lovely, this is Puerto Rico. We can see we got a lovely San Juan right here. A little disappointed at the fort though. I'm not going to lie, it looks a little bit flatter than I remember being in person, but at least you get a pretty good look at, where the old city is and everything like that. So what is Dead Reckoning? Dead Reckoning is the process of basically traveling by knowing how much distance you cover over a certain amount of time. So for us, if we actually take a look down here right now, we'll notice that looking at my little instrumentation, obviously we're cheating a little bit because we got a handy-dandy GPS, but that's perfectly fine. You'll notice that I'm sitting here traveling here with no wind today. We're doing a true airspeed of 119 knots, and we have a ground speed of 118 knots. You'll also notice that I have an indicated speed of 114 knots. So the first fundamental thing you have to remember whenever you're doing any calculations based on how far am I traveling in a given amount of time is you have to take into account the physical speed you're traveling over the ground. Right now, like I said, because this is a G1000, it knows that I'm physically traveling 118 knots over the ground. If you don't have this information at your disposal, you're going to have to calculate it. So the way we calculate this in the real world is called calculating your true airspeed, is we take our indicated airspeed, our altitude, and then we go ahead and combine that with the outside air temperature. So let's go ahead and take a look here. So I know my indicated altitude right now is going to be 2,500 feet. This website, by the way, is e6bx.com. My altimeter setting right now is 29902, which it is, so we're going to leave that alone. Outside temperature, make sure you get it in C or in F. If you get this wrong, you're busted. My outside air temperature is 10 degrees on the C scale. So we're going to go up here. I'm going to go ahead and type in 10 degrees. Remember, it's on the C scale. Important. Indicated airspeed is 114 knots. I'm going to type in 114. And it's going to go ahead and do some quick math for me, and it's going to tell me that my true airspeed here, as you can see, is 118 knots, which is exactly correct. Because if you take a look here, it says that our true airspeed is 119. You're probably sitting there saying, it's wrong, it's wrong, it's wrong. It's about a quarter of a knot off. So I would imagine the calculation here is probably slightly more precise, but we can't actually read our exact speed. So now that we know what our true airspeed is, we know how much distance we can cover over a certain amount of time. Because our true airspeed is 118 knots, that would mean that in 1 hour, we would cover 118 nautical miles, assuming there's no wind. The next video, we'll take a look at what happens when there is wind. So that works great for us. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to E6BX real quick. I'm going to go ahead and grab ourselves a little nav map so we can plot this sucker out. All right, we're looking pretty good to go. You can see we're just about here to hit this harbor. So one of the things I noticed when I was looking directly out of my window here is I noticed this big block of water chilling right there. Look over on a little nav map, especially if I take my current heading and kind of project it out. It looks like it's going to be roughly in the center of this particular body here. So what I'm going to use this is my starting point. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just add this position to the flight plan. And then what I'm going to do is pick my ending point. So since we're trying to keep the same heading here, keeping things simple, we'll use this little intersection down here as my ending point. So go ahead and add that position to my little flight plan here. So what do we know? We know that this is 12.6 nautical miles away, and we know that it's 213 magnetic heading. So when I cross this particular position, I need to make sure my heading is 213 magnetic. Since we're not dealing with wind today, we're not going to worry so much about this being anything other than 213. But what we're very interested in is this 12.6 number here. The reason that 12.6 number is going to be so important for us is because that's going to be the number that we're going to be using so that we can go ahead and calculate have we reached our destination yet. So we know that's 12.6. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a calculator real quickly. You can use the E6BX as well. So we know we're traveling 118 knots, and we know that we need to travel 12.6 nautical miles. So 12.6 divided by 118 would mean that it's going to take us 0.1067 hours. Now, that's not a very useful number in my opinion. So what I'm going to do is multiply that by 60. So that's going to tell me my flight is going to take 6 minutes, 0.40. Now, if we want to have a little bit of fun here, we could actually calculate the 0.40 by also multiplying by 60. 6 minutes and 24 seconds. So what am I going to do with that information? Well, let's pop back over to Flight Sim real quick here. So we need to be on a 213 magnetic heading. So I'm going to go ahead and dial this into 213 right away. We're not going to turn the plane just yet. We actually, I'm going to center that real fast. I'm going to shut off heading hold. We're actually frozen up in the air here, so we don't have to worry about that 213. And we notice we're going to need 6 minutes and 40 seconds. We have to go ahead and count 6.4 minutes, which is 6 minutes and 24 seconds, sorry. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down to my timer. And what we can do is we can actually dial this in to have a specific amount of time. So I'm actually going to go 6 minutes over here to the 6 minutes. Bop over here to the 24 point. Whoa. So I have a mouse that's from 2004, in case anybody's curious. It's just kind of one of those things where I have not found a replacement for it yet. There we go. So 6 minutes and 24. It looks pretty good to me. I'm going to press the Enter key. Swing over to here. I'm going to go to down. Enter. So what's going to happen is we're going to cross this point, activate our timer, and then theoretically, exactly in 6 minutes and 24 seconds, we should be crossing that other point that we expected to have. Remember, we're dealing with no wind here. When we do this with wind a little later on, things get a little bit more mathematically complicated. But for now, we're just showing you the concept itself. So I'm going to go ahead and unpause. So we're going to go ahead and proceed on our way here. So we're cruising right along. That's the old San Juan right there. I was making the comment a little bit earlier on this ship that got a little underwater. That's a problem. This is a very neat city, by the way. Mofongo is what you're going to be looking out to try when you do head down to that city. It's a pretty slick thing. It kind of reminds me of like mashed potatoes. So I'm looking out my nose here. Remember, this is going to be that first point we're going to be trying to cross, and then we're going to be swinging around, activating our timer. So what we want to be paying very close attention to is to make sure our airspeed is what we calculated it at. So I'm doing about 114 right now. I'm actually going to back the throttle back a little teeny tiny bit because our true airspeed is too high. And again, if you need help calculating that true airspeed, you saw us doing that just a few moments ago. So we're going to cross this body of water. I thought it was kind of interesting, a little nav map, that this body of water was basically a swamp. In this one, it's like an actual pond. So unfortunately, I did not get to see that. This airport, by the way, is great because you have a lot of military aircraft going in and out of here as well, depending on what kind of thing you're into, of course. All right, here we go. So we've got to activate the timer as soon as we cross that point. I'm looking at my little GPS map here to help me out. We actually need to do two things at once here. Ready? Get ready to press heading hold mode. Oh boy. Remember, it takes time to turn. This time it's going to take us to turn is going to impact the performance of this, so keep that in mind. Let's go ahead and hit heading hold. We want to basically round the corner as we go through. And heading hold, we're going to activate our timer. Off we go. So what's going to happen now, again, keep in mind when you're flying this by hand, this is a much less precise process. We're basically going to go ahead and fast forward to the end here, and what will happen is we're hoping that when this says 30 seconds to go, we should almost be exactly crossing that particular point of the ground. And it's very interesting to see how close we can actually get it. So let's fast forward. All right, we got about 15 seconds to go now. Now we're coming up on our little intersection, I hope. Again, keep in mind, we've stayed on this exact same magnetic heading. We've been maintaining as close as we can to our 118 knots ground speed. Again, obviously, if there's wind, this doesn't work, but we'll take a look at that later. 2, 1, pause. All right, let's go ahead and stop the clock. How do we do? So if we look straight down, there should be a major intersection here. So taking a look. Do you see any major intersections? Do you see any major intersections? Do you see any major intersections? I do not, because the major intersection is right here. Now, you're probably sitting there going, well, that's not bad. Like, just how far off were you? Well, let's go ahead and take a look at a little nav map real quickly here. You can see very, very clearly that we easily overshot this by, it's actually a fairly significant amount of distance here. Let's go ahead and calculate that real quickly here. I'll measure distance from here. We're off by about 1.2 nautical miles. So what went wrong here? There's actually a lot of little things that can go wrong that probably had an impact on our overall performance. One of the things you have to remember when you are doing dead reckoning is that it's not a precise science, especially when weather's involved, as you'll see a little later. We're supposed to be here. We're actually about a mile off after traveling just 6 minutes. 6.4 minutes, which gives you an idea, because of how fast the airplane is traveling, it has a big impact on that. You're probably sitting here saying, well, this value was not wrong, or that value was not right, or this value is not wrong. Most of our values are actually calculated fairly well. Now, my theory there is that we probably were traveling quite a bit faster than we had calculated for. But at the same time, if you're doing actual dead reckoning navigation, one of the things you always want to remember is you want to double check to make sure that the positions you're crossing are actually when you cross them. So one thing you will observe, however, is how accurate it was. If I actually were to grab the plane and I'll back it up a teeny tiny bit here, so I'll park it right here, you can actually see that we were supposed to be hitting basically this little section of the road where the little zigzag was, and you can see we crossed it off by maybe about 300-400 feet, which is nothing. So laterally, we did beautifully, longitudinally, in and out kind of a thing. We were off by a little bit of time there. But again, a lot of that has to do with calculating that ground speed correctly and not being at the mercy of any wind. But as you could see there, if we were actually navigating in a real scenario, we could have made our adjustment, flown back the way we need to flow, and then we would have been perfectly fine. So again, dead reckoning is an amazing process. When you bring in the wind, which we'll do next time, you'll find that the process becomes progressively less precise. But other than that, enjoy.